Hello everyone, welcome to the Computer Guys videos. In this video, I'll be teaching you guys about DHCP, what DHCP is, and why do we need it, and we'll be implementing it, configuring it on Windows Server 2016 data center virtual machine using VMware Workstation 15. So let's go ahead, really jump into it and see what DHCP is before we get into the lab. So basically, DHCP is known as Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Is a protocol, and what it basically does, a very brief, very general definition for it. It dynamically assigns IP address and other information to network devices. And what I mean by other is that it can be a subnet mask, it can be default gateway, it can be DNS server, secondary DNS server, third DNS server. It's not just restricted or limited to IP address. And why do we have it? We can basically have it installed and configured on a server. And this is exactly what we'll be doing in our example right after this. Or it can be configured on a network router such as Cisco router, and you can have any more other, but it's not limited to a server. You can also have Linux. We'll probably be doing this in our upcoming labs. It's very easy to implement and manage. Not a lot of effort is put into this. Since we are getting more technical, a lot easier to implement and manage. Not a lot of hassle. So big question, why do we need DHCP? Well, basically number one, it saves time. How it saves time? Let's go back a couple of years back, actually maybe 2 decades. Before what we had to do, we had to go and statically assign IP addresses to network devices such as a workstation or let's say a printer. And this was a hassle. Why? Let's say you are an organization with 500 people. You have to go and manually assign 500 IP addresses. You have 100 printers in 1,000 people organization across the country. You have to have someone manually managing it. So it takes time. It's a hassle. What DHCP is that, since it's dynamically assigning everything, IP address, subnet mask, DNS, default gateway, you don't have to worry about doing anything manually. You just configure your server and the DHCP will take care of all of that for you. No conflict. So let's say if you're at 500 workstation, there are chances of making mistake, chances of you assigning same IP address to multiple workstation is a lot higher as compared to a DHCP server. DHCP server knows when it assigns one, it's assigned. It will not go ahead and take that one. It will take the one after that. So let's say we assign, the DHCP server assigns 192.168.1.1. It will not assign or try to assign that one. It will go ahead to 2, 3, or 4, and so on, so on. We can have a DHCP server in the middle in our data center, and we can be managing it ourselves. So centralized management, security, you don't have to go and manually do it, and less effort. Again, no manual effort put into it, maybe just a little bit. So a very rough diagram of how DHCP works. So you have a client here, let's say. We'll name this guy client 1, and then we have a DHCP server here, and we'll name it DHCP server 1. So what your client does is configure to get IP address and the other information dynamically. So what it will do, it will send out a DHCP client broadcast request to, client DHCP broadcast discover message across. And any DHCP server that in the network, or you can have it configured differently in the network or outside, maybe in some other way, picks it up. It will reply back to your client with DHCP server unicast offer message. So it will say, hey client 1, I have IP address to give it to you. Do you want it? The client 1 will go ahead and say, yes, server 1, DHCP server 1, I want it. Request, send the DHCP client request message, and then the DHCP server will go back and assign the information. And then it's not included in the diagram. DHCP server will be, once the DHCP server, the client has got all the information, IP address and other things, it will go ahead and go back to the DHCP server with an acknowledgement message saying that I got what I wanted. Thank you very much. Hello guys. So sorry, my recording got cut off somehow, but we are back And we are going to start off with the lab right now. So you can see we have logged into the test virtual machine, test VM, that we installed in the first video on VMware Workstation 15. So we'll be using that for the DHCP example here. But before we go ahead and start installing the DHCP server role, let's go ahead and check our network configuration on this one here. So we'll go to command prompt and we'll run the following command: ipconfig/all. And as we can see here, we only have one Ethernet network adapter on this virtual machine, Ethernet 0. You can see we have assigned a static IP address 192.168.1.2 with the subnet mask of /24 here. And no default gateway, and we don't have a DNS server yet, so I just left that blank. Okay, so let's go ahead and install the DHCP server role here. So for that, we can just go to Server Manager through Start menu. And on Server Manager, we'll click on Add Roles and Features. And you can see that we get Select Installation tab. So we'll be selecting role-based or feature-based installation, and we'll click Next here. Well, since we only have one server in our network, we'll select that by default. And from here, the list of available roles, we'll select DHCP server. But before we put a check mark, let's highlight it, and it will display a brief description. So from Microsoft point of view, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol DHCP server enables you to centrally configure, manage, and provide temporary IP addresses and related information for client computers. What they mean by temporary is that when the system assigns a DHCP, when a DHCP server assigns an IP address to a workstation or any other network device, it's a lease. It's not like you got it and the system will, or the network device will have it as long as it wants. It can have, but we'll have to configure it. But by default, there is a lease time. It can be 7 weeks, 1 week, couple of days, couple of 100 days, or by the default one, which I think is 7. I might not be 100% sure. Okay. One more thing, since we are reading this, is that we can exclude some IP address and assign those not really manually, but what we can do is we can exclude, and then we can have an exception that following MAC address or following workstation will always get a particular IP address. So for let's say we have a printer. We don't want the IP address for the printer to change all the time, because our clients are connecting. When we configure the printer on their workstation, it will be configured with the IP address it looks at that moment. If it changes tomorrow, the system doesn't know about it. So the system will try to ping that particular address. Since it's not there, it will fail and the user will not be able to print. So we don't want that. We will have an exclusion, and we will have a reservation for that. So let's go ahead right now and install the DHCP server here. We'll select that, and you can see that we have some features that we need to add. Remote Server Administrator Tool, we'll select Add Features. We'll click Next here. And then we have some features that we can install, but for now we don't need anything. We'll say Next here. And again, a little bit of reading here for DHCP. We can read that in our free time. We'll click Next right now. And everything seems okay to install. We can click Install, but before that, let's check mark this. Restart the destination server automatically if required. I don't think so it will restart, but let's just put it there so that we don't have to. And we get a red message right away that if our installation is completed and the restart is required automatically, the system will do it automatically. We will say yes for that, and we'll click Install. This is installing. This will be two-part video. In the second part, I'll be showing you guys how to configure a client computer to get IP address dynamically. So at the end of this part, we'll be creating a virtual machine, client virtual machine, and then I'll install Windows 10 on that, and then we'll connect to our DHCP server to get an IP address. And installation doesn't seem to be taking that long. It'd be a couple of, maybe a minute to go. And as we can see, the installation has succeeded on this one. We'll close, and we can see we have a warning or caution mark here. We'll click that, and we have to complete DHCP configuration. We'll click on that right now, and we can see that we get this message: the following steps will be performed to complete the configuration of the DHCP server on the target computer. And the steps are: create the following security groups for delegation of DHCP server administration, DHCP administrators, DHCP users. We'll commit. The status of the post-install configuration steps are indicated below. Creating security groups, done. Please restart the DHCP server on the target computer for security groups to be effective. So we'll close that. We'll close, and we'll do a quick restart. We'll say plan here, and the restart shouldn't take maybe 10 to 15 seconds. This restart is very quick most of the time. And we seems to be coming back in the game here. And let's send Control-Alt-Delete. Oops, the password is not correct. Okay. We'll close this here. And if we go into computer management right now, we should have our groups there. You can see we have our groups DHCP administrators, and if we double click on this one, it says a very brief description. It says members who have administrative access to DHCP service. So we can add our users who need to be managing the DHCP server. We can give them access, and then we have another user group called DHCP users. And this one says members who have view-only access to the DHCP server. So what we can do is, let's say if we have a co-op students who just need to be able to see the configuration so that he can learn about it or she can learn about it. So we can add them to this group, and they will only have read access or view-only access to the DHCP server. They won't be able to make any changes. So we don't have to worry about that. We can add them to this group, and we can add our administrators to this one. So we'll exit out of this. Since we don't have Active Directory installed, we'll just leave this part for now. So let's go ahead into Windows Administrative Tools and select DHCP. We'll double click, and you can see we have our server displayed here, Tor 8001. And we have two options here. We can either configure our DHCP server for IPv4 or for IPv6. Since we are not doing IPv6, we'll leave that for now. We'll expand this one here, and you can see we have an option here, add a scope. So what scope does is basically gets the information for your IP, network, IP address range, subnet mask, and other information like default gateway and DNS server, and it has that, and it's ready to give out to the clients. Very brief description is scope is a range of IP addresses assigned to computers requesting a dynamic address, and we must create and configure the scope before dynamic IP addresses can be assigned to client computers or other network devices. We'll go and we'll right click on IPv4. We'll click new scope. We'll click next, and we have to give a name to the scope. So we'll say scope 1 here. We'll say next, and then we have this range here. Enter the range of the addresses that you want the scope to distribute. So we'll put 192.168.1. Let's say 10. sorry, 1, and for the end IP address we'll put 192.168.1.10. So it will only give out IP addresses in this range 1.1 to 1.10. Subnet mask will be, the length will be 24. 255.255.255.0. We'll click next, and we have an exclusion. So let's do this. So you might have noticed that the start IP address is .1.1, but this virtual machine, the one we're working on right now, already has this one. So what is going to happen? Would there be a conflict? Yes, there will be, because the DHCP server will try to give this one out, and when another machine gets it, there will be a conflict. So let's go ahead and put an exclusion. So what are exclusions? Exclusions are addresses or a range. It's not just one address. We can have a range, let's say 192.168.1.4 to 1.10, and that one will not be given out dynamically. Addresses that are not distributed by server. A delay is the time duration by which the server will delay the transmission of a DHCP offer message. So we'll put start IP address for exclusion 192.168.1.1. Since we don't need an address for this one here, we'll click next. And by default, I was just 1 day less. Default lease time is 8 days. We can go ahead as much as we want, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, but we'll accept the default 8 days, and we'll click next. What is this here? So we can configure other options for the DHCP server. So let's say if we select yes for this one and we click next, we can have the router address assigned, but we don't have it. We'll go back and we'll say no, I will configure these options later. We'll click next, and this completes our configuration. We'll click finish here, and you can see our scope 1 is there. So right now we can see it shows as down, and that is probably because we have to activate it. So we'll click on that, and you can see the server is activated right now. We have the option to deactivate the scope. So let's say first we know that God forbid, the network has been compromised, and we want our DHCP server to not distribute IP address because we know that someone has physically connected their device, a hacker has physically connected our device, and they must be looking for IP address. So we'll shut down the scope so that they don't get one. So let's go ahead into reservation. So what is reservation? Reservation ensures that the DHCP client is always assigned the same IP address. Very simple. So we'll click here, and we'll click new reservation, and this reservation will be configuring for this exact virtual machine, even though we have excluded it, but we still want it because we haven't assigned it. So we'll say let's give out the host name so it's easy to remember and manage. We'll say tor 801 reservation, and in the IP addresses we'll put 1. And how does the system know that? How did the DHCP server know that which IP address goes to who? And for that we have the MAC address. So what we'll be doing is we'll be going to command prompt here. We'll type ipconfig/all, and we'll get the MAC address of our network adapter Ethernet 0. We'll paste that, and supported types we'll put let's just leave it as both. And if we see it here, we can see the reservation is there for tor 801 with IP address 192.168.1.1. Actually, it was not 1.1. I just remembered it right now. So let's go ahead and change the IP address just to make life easier instead of changing the DHCP configuration actually. So now this particular IP address 192.168.1.1 will not be assigned to any machine because it's statically assigned to this one. So very simple configuration. Now we'll move on to part 2. So let's go ahead very quickly and create a virtual machine. We'll select typical. I will install the OS later. Actually, you know what? Let's install it. Select it already. We have Windows 10 Pro. Say next. We'll put administrator. Put a password here. Yes, we can do it later. We'll say client 01. We'll say next here. We'll assign hard drive of this of 25 gigs here. We'll say next, and we'll finish that. It will create the disk. So right now I'm going to stop the video here. I'll configure the client virtual machine, and I'll come back when it's ready to start. Okay, see you guys in the part 2.